This moves us to our action agenda. For actions as necessary or appropriate on matters discussed in executive session. Do I have any motions?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve selected employment items shown in Exhibit A.
Do I have a second?
Ms. Snipes, before we proceed with that motion, may I have a point of order? I would like to have a note put in the minutes that I recused myself from executive session item 3G.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Did I get a second?
Madam Chair, I move to divide the question on Exhibit A. I would like to amend the motion to remove line 3.
I think those are two different things. Do you just want to,
Yeah.
you have to do two motions if you want to do that. One to divide the question and a separate one. You want to do that? Okay. Okay, so I second how do you want to divide it?
To vote on line 3 separately, everything else.
Oh, okay, so that's one motion. I second.
Mrs. Satterfield?
I need a little clarity. So you want to omit line,
They want to vote on line 3 of the employment packet separately.
okay.
And I can explain if you need.
So, I'm sorry?
He's asking, do you want an explanation?
Yeah, could you
Yeah.
clarify for me, Mr. Banham?
The board is being asked to approve a reporting relationship that isn't in the best interest of our students and staff. My opinion.
Mrs. Scully?
I disagree. There's nothing saying that it's not in the best interest of our schools and staff.
I don't know how much of this we can touch.
Well, first, under Robert's rules, first we have to vote, we can discuss, but we have to vote on whether or not to divide the question. If that vote passes,
Okay.
then we can discuss the
Let's-
actual motion.
Let's start there. All right, we have a motion on the floor to divide the question. All those in favor?
Yes.
All opposed? Okay, so that motion fails. Now, we have an original motion on the floor, which is to improve the employment packet. Ms. Huddle, I feel like you tried to make a different, do you still want to make?
Yeah, I was just seconding, I was clarifying his motion. I would like to amend the motion to approve Exhibit A to exclude line item 3.
No, we
Second.
voted to divide the question.
It's actually different.
No,
So,
I know, I
yeah,
was
it's,
clarifying.
I'm
I
amending
got
the
you.
original.
I got it. All right, did I have a second? Oh,
Second.
Elizabeth? Okay, all right. We have,
And I want to, I'm allowed to speak to my motion. I just want to say that I believe this reporting relationship that is being recommended is counter to board policy. It has absolutely nothing to do with the individual involved.
does the administration want to comment?
We will restrict our comments on employee matters to executive session.
Okay.
I'd like to call the question.
All right, all those in
Excuse,
favor?
can I ask one question? So we are voting to remove line item 3
Yes,
from, I'm
to
sorry?
exclude them, yes, yes. There's an amendment to exclude line item 3. All those in favor of the amended motion?
Yes.
All opposed? All right, and the motion fails. Now we're back to the original motion, which is to include,
Can I ask a question?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. We received a email with an Exhibit H that said it was for executive session, and it had a personnel matter in it. So I just want to clarify that what we are voting on does not include the personnel items that were in Exhibit H.
I call the question.
Say that again?
Okay. We received an email, I think Friday, from Ms. White that had some additional items in it for tonight, and it had what was labeled Exhibit H for executive session. In that packet, there were a recommendation to add 2 new positions. And I just want to make sure that when we take this vote, it excludes that Exhibit H as it pertains to selected employment items. And I emailed Dr. Ross about this. I just want to make sure.
Because I'm not sure what we're talking about.
There was in the original executive session packet, there was Exhibit H that listed some information. That information I wanted to discuss in executive session had to deal with some personnel matters and some discipline matters. That was questioned before the meeting. As a result, I withdrew that from executive session. So there's no discussion now because it was withdrawn.
So that answers your question that this is not
It
all
does.
that.
Thank you.
Okay, got
So,
it.
so does that mean we're not voting on H? Okay.
No. Okay, so, back to the original motion, which is to, Mrs. Scott's original motion, which is to approve selected employment items under Exhibit A. All those in favor? All opposed?
Ms. Barnhart, are you there?
Yes, opposed.
And the motion carries 4-3.
Mr. Satterfield, did you vote in favor?
So it failed.
Well, it failed. Okay.
So we don't approve these.
So we have a package. Well, I ain't never seen that happen before. So,
I'm going to use something from Robert's Rules of Orders. If you voted in favor of a motion, you are allowed to make a motion to reconsider, just to make sure that we understand where Mr. Satterfield fits. So I'm going to move to reconsider the amendment to approve Exhibit A other than line 3.
Second.
Point of order, your amendment failed. So you
Correct.
can't you didn't vote in the affirmative, so you can't call it a reconsider it.
Okay. I'll withdraw. I'm not sure how it works that way, but anyway, I'll withdraw.
I'd like to make a motion to reconsider the approval of, sorry, I have it in front of me. Exhibit A, selected employment items as it reads in the board packet.
If Mr. Scully is right on his diagnosis of Robert's Rules, you can't do that either.
Somebody on the prevailing vote side has to.
I thought somebody voted in the affirmative.
And there
it
was no
failed, so
prevailing
somebody in
vote.
I will rescind my motion.
do we have other motions on items discussed in executive
Yeah.
session?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the LS3P A1A Architecture and Engineering Contract of the new cafeteria addition and renovation of the current cafeteria at Irmo High School, shown in Exhibit C.
Second.
All in favor?
I'd like to discuss.
Yes, ma'am.
I have no problem with the vendor that was selected. However, a couple things. One is, I'm not sure that the public really understood that we were getting a new cafeteria out of this. It was discussed in the 5-year plan early last year, but when we got to the presentations, it was discussed as part of the 5-year plan, but when we got to the discussions prior to as part of the bond referendum, it wasn't really spelled out that a cafeteria was in there. So I'm a little concerned about that, but my bigger concern is that this contract is being proposed as a construction manager at risk. And a lot of people don't know what that is, but so I want to explain to the public. So traditionally, there's what they call design, bid, build. What that means is the architect designs the whole thing, and then you put it out for bid, and the lowest bid that is meets the criteria wins. We did that with Irmo High School East Wing replacement. When that was originally estimated by the architect, they estimated that that would cost $46.2 million, okay? But we put it out for bid, and the bid actually came in at $37.9 million. We saved $8 million because we selected the lowest priced bid that met the criteria. With construction manager at risk, the architect, in collaboration with the selected construction company, sets a maximum price. So the bid is not based on price. The bid is essentially a beauty contest. Who do you like? Who's proposal? You've worked with them before, whatever. And then it's a cost plus. And we already have proof that when we put it out to the free market and bid it, we saved over $8 million. So I'm going to vote no to this. It has nothing to do with the architect that was selected. It has to do with the construction management bidding process that is being proposed. And I have a document to put in the minutes.
I'm sorry. I know there'd be disagreement of the delivery system, and I just think the administration has put together a program that works for the educational and the construction site for Irmo High School and operations. I guess my question is, you said that there was no information about there being a cafeteria in Phase 2. Is that correct?
Not in the bond. I went back and you sent me the April, but that was the 5-year plan. That was in a presentation in April. But I looked through all the presentations that were specific to the bond referendum and didn't see it in there. And I'm not the only board member who doesn't remember that. And I'm not opposed to a cafeteria. I just wish we'd slow down a minute and actually talk about it, because we're talking about pulling out an existing cafeteria with working equipment and then building a new one, and I just worry about
my
that.
sensitivity on this is that we gave multiple presentations on that all around the community, and we voted on the cafeteria. The language is actually on the question in the ballot referendum.
Actually, I think
I'm not sure if I'm interrupting, but I agree with Ms. Huddle. I do not remember this discussion in regards to the cafeteria, a new building.
It just says student center. And I looked back through all the presentations.
The board approved. I don't know if we have you have the actual question? Okay. I guess all of the questions and presentations that we have done on this since April 18th and since the approval on May 20th, we've always talked about how that building with the students in it operationally, if you go there, how are those students able to eat every day? And that they would need a cafeteria, student center on the end of that. I guess no questions came up about it every presentation we gave. And when we put it in the question, I thought that was clear. But again, I just wanted to make that case, and I'll leave my comments there.
All right. All right, at this time, we'll take a vote.
Madam Chair, make one more comment. I just want to state and put on the record that we did receive legal advice that from our attorney in executive session that confirmed that the process proposed by the administration is typical and common and actually the prevailing process for these types of projects. So they're not proposing to do anything that's that's uncommon. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
All right, can we call the vote? All those in favor? All opposed? And the motion carries 4-3. Do we have any other matters?
Yes, I have one, Ms. Snipes. I made an error. It was on my part, my fault, nobody else's. I would like to make a motion to revisit selected employment items, Exhibit A, for action.
Point of order. You can't. Under Robert's rules, if you abstain, you can't.
So who is it that
Well,
can
first
bring
of
it
all, we
back
were
up?
told that if you voted in the affirmative, you could, and then we were told you could not. Can somebody please clarify?
Okay,
I'd like
Robert's
to
rules.
recognize Ms. Taylor.
thank you, Madam Chair. What we can do is have a motion to reconsider. And so what someone who voted on the prevailing side of the original motion would have to make that motion.
And there was no prevailing side.
Well, the failing side would be the prevailing side in that, because it didn't pass.
Because it was a tie.
I don't agree with that. It didn't I'm just going to say, it didn't pass. There was no prevailing.
So is it either side since it was a tie? I'm asking.
My opinion is the prevailing side would be the failing side.
And we both failed.
Yes, and let me say one other thing, and I'll say that to Ms. Huddle and Mr. Beanham and Ms. Barnhart. My poor judgment there and not hearing well.
Well, that doesn't matter if we can't.
I understand, but they can, because they are the failing side, right?
Well, we all failed.
Well, oh.
I mean,
Oh, well,
seriously.
that's true. So
Yeah,
can I make the
that's-
motion?
yeah.
The motion was for the approval of it, and it didn't pass approval, so it failed. So the voters voting, members voting to approve were on the failing side. The members voting to
Thank
fail
you,
it.
because I needed some clarity
We're on
on
the-
that. Got it.
So one of the three of you can make the motion?
No, it has to be.
Nope, it has to be somebody who was against that. So they have to either do a motion to reconsider or some form of an amendment, I believe, right?
Let's see.
While Ms. Taylor's looking that up, let's move on with other matters on executive session.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the purchase of property and the purchase contract shown in Exhibit D.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any discussion?
Yes, I'd like to amend the motion to indicate that the purchase price will come from the $3.5 million that was previously set aside from the fund balance.
Is that just for informational purposes?
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. She just wants to make sure, she just wants the motion to read where the money is coming from. All those in favor
Aye.
of her amendment just adds that the motion, that it reads where the money is coming from. Do you understand it for your notes? Sorry, we're being very difficult today.
May I ask a question? May I ask a question?
Sure.
Is this common procedure to list where the funding is coming from for a particular motion in executive session?
A lot of purchases previously in the minutes do, and it's the only record we really have of votes, so that's why I wanted to make the amendment. So anybody looks at this a year or 2 years from now, you can see. Because it's also, I'm clarifying, because this property is purchased for a bond referendum project. So the assumption would be that the money came out of the bond
coming from the
referendum
bond,
fund.
but it's not.
And it's not. So that's the other reason I would like to include it in the minutes.
Can-
But it's not common to put that in a motion. What would be more common and probably more appropriate was to just make it on the record during the discussion and leave the motion alone.
I would agree with you if our minutes included discussion, but they do not.
All right. We are going to take the vote. All those in favor of Ms. Huddle's motion, just to note where the funds are coming from, if you're in favor,
Yes.
opposed, And the motion carries. All right, we have a original motion on the floor. All those in favor?
Yes.
All right. All opposed, and the motion carries 7-0. Do you have a response for me, Ms. Taylor?
Yes, ma'am. I think the only alternative to the motion to reconsider would be a motion to rescind. However, the problem with that is you can only make that motion on a previously adopted motion, and we do not have an adopted motion.
Okay.
So I think motion to reconsider is the only course at this point.
Okay. All right, well, we've never had a meeting where we didn't approve any employees, so I don't know what we do here, but we're just gonna keep on moving with the agenda for now, because I don't know.
What's your recommendation, Ms. Taylor? We have 51 employees that if we don't hire, we could lose.
My recommendation, if we want to attempt to pass that motion, would be someone who previously voted on the
Yea or nay?
prevailing side of that motion to make a motion to reconsider.
So would that be a vote yea or a vote nay?
That would have been a vote nay.
Nay.
Okay.
Ms. Snipes, can I
Yes,
make a
ma'am.
point?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bainham's motion to divide the question failed. If that motion was to be reconsidered by the prevailing individuals or one of them, then we could vote on it separately, and the line item, if it would not endanger the other 51 staff members.
Okay.
Likewise, if someone on the prevailing side of that motion made a motion to reconsider the entire exhibit, those employees would be hired.
Well, let's do what was usually the right thing, which is everybody's probably a little unhappy with the final verdict. So it seems like the best path forward is for us to reconsider Mr. Bainham's motion, which is to divide the question. Without that, we don't move forward. And we do not want to lose employees because we can't get it together.
So I make a motion to reconsider Mr. Bainham's motion.
We need a second.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Bain.
Perfect. All right. So the motion is on the floor to divide the question, which takes us.
Technically, the motion is to reconsider.
Oh,
So
sorry, there's a
first we have
motion on
to
the floor
vote
to
whether or not to reconsider.
All those in favor?
Wait, exactly, restate your original motion, Mr. Bainham.
Well, first, we're taking a motion on just reconsidering.
Oh,
Then he has to, I think, remake the motion.
okay.
So, part one. All those in favor of reconsidering Mr. Bainham's motion, please raise your hands.
Yes.
Perfect. Motion carries 7-0. Mr. Bainham, can you please restate your motion for the record?
I would like to amend the motion to remove line 3 under Exhibit A.
Well, to separate
Divide the
them,
question.
Separate it.
to divide the question.
Divide the question, sorry.
And we got a second. All those in favor?
Can I ask a question, Ms. Snipes? Again, please bear
Go
with
ahead.
me. So to vote yea or nay does not matter with regards to re-voting?
Right
on
now,
the-
we're just voting to split the question. We're going to take two employment motions. All those in favor? All opposed?
Yes.
Yes, great. Motion passes 7-0. I need another motion to split these up.
I make a
please.
motion to approve selected employment items shown in Exhibit A, except for line item number 3.
Can I get a second? All those in favor?
Yes.
And the motion carries 6-0.
I make a motion to approve selected employment items shown in Exhibit A. Well, I make a motion to approve line item number 3 of selected employment items shown in Exhibit A.
Second.
All those in favor? All opposed?
No.
And the motion carries 4-3.
Ms. Snipes, can I make just a quick statement? I apologize to the rest of the board for my lack of hearing, number one, and my confusion. So I appreciate everybody working with me to resolve this matter. I would not want to lose employees or have anybody have to be anxious or worried about their position not being renewed. So thank you.
Bring your hearing aid to the next meeting, Mr. Satterfield. All right, that takes us to the second and final reading of Board Policy KF, Community Use of School Facilities.
Coming to the lectern is our Chief of Operations, Dr. Gary. Second and final reading.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the second and final reading of proposed revisions to Board Policy KF, Community Use of School Facilities, shown in Exhibit F.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? The motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Dr. Gary.
Make a motion to approve the approval of the locally board-approved course, design subject area course application, band and physical education, as shown in Exhibit G.
Second.
Do we have any discussion? All in favor? All opposed?
Yes.
And the motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Ms. McCaskill.
Make a motion to approve the second reading of fiscal year 2025 and 2026 general fund budget, shown in Exhibit H.
Let me make a note as Ms. Tucker comes forward. I have gotten some feedback just about us having enough time to review the budget and have discussion. So please note at the June 9th meeting, Dr. Ross, we'd like to have continuation of the discussion around the budget, and we'll take the third and final vote at the June 23rd meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. So for our discussion and second reading, last reading we presented you some options. Essentially, we had lots of things in the air this year. There were lots of changes with local revenue, lots of changes with state revenue. We had gotten some direction from the board on priorities, and so we presented the board a lot of options at our first reading, and so we wanted to actually make a recommendation this time of what we feel as a administration we can do with trying to balance the budget with what revenues look like versus what the cost for the priorities that the board has given us. So just to kind of revisit this, which there'll be an amendment to the June 9th, so that will be our third reading, discussion and third reading, and then we'll have our final reading on June 23rd, I believe is the second board meeting in June. And we will have given direction from today, we will have a book for you after the discussion today. So a couple of legislative updates. So since we talked last, the House has come back with House 2, and there were a couple of amendments worthy of noting. Proviso 1.3 that Dr. Ross talked about at length earlier adjusted the add-on weightings for virtual charter schools down from 0.65 to 0.35, and then added language for Revenue and Fiscal Affairs to review the student weightings with the state aid to classroom, come up with a funding formula that would better align funding with enrollment for charter schools and consistent with public schools as well. And so that is something that House 2 has looked at. It was different from House and Senate, so that's something conference will have to come back with as far as looking at a consistency between the two versions at the legislature. And conference committee actually meets tomorrow at 12:30, right after Revenue and Fiscal Affairs comes out with new revenue estimates. So the other legislative update, note Proviso 108.6, it's the employer premium increase of 4.6 and a subscriber premium increase of 0. So the employer piece of health insurance will go up, but the subscribers, the employees will actually not see that increase. And that will take effect during the 2026 plan year, so half of next budget year. A couple of other bills that have been ratified or signed into law by the governor since our last discussion. H 3196, the Educator Assistance Act. This bill modifies the teacher certification requirements, has a lifelong teaching certificate, retired educators, and also adjusts professional development days from 3 to 4 and requires districts to implement a sick leave bank for all school staff. This was signed by the governor on May 7th. And then S78, which was a concern for us when we were looking at the budget, is credit for work experience. This is the bill that would allow teachers in alternative paths to education that have had previous work experience outside of education to essentially get 1 year of teacher or credit on their teaching certificate for every 2 years in the industry. And so we were concerned about this from a budget perspective, not knowing how many of our teachers would qualify and what this would look like as a budget impact. And so they made an amendment to this to amend it to stipulate that pay adjustments for the new salary step would be implemented the following year. So essentially next year, teachers can submit their documentation to the Department of Education to show that they have worked outside of education or in industry, anything that is related to their subject area. The Department of Education will verify that, that education or work experience and add that to their teacher certification. So when we build the budget for the following year, we will have their correct step and years of experience. So we will be able to better plan for that as opposed to not knowing how the State Department would implement this. So that was ratified on 5/8. So budget considerations. We've talked about our ADM and our weighted pupil units. The ADM is available on the State Department of Education's website. This is a number that is calculated and reported by the State Department of Education. You can see across all school districts, if you are growing, you have to outpace the growth of the state in order to receive additional funding. Weighted pupil units is that additional weighting that each individual person or each individual student gets depending on whether they are in a public school, in a charter school. There's additional weightings for gifted and talented, for students in poverty, for lots of different things. And that is a number that we see, but we do not see the statewide allocation. So it's hard to know that piece of the formula when there is not a statewide reporting method that shows every district and their weighted pupil units. So we don't know how we fall looking at districts outside of District 5. So as we look at the state budget considerations, just to give you an idea of what's the same versus what's different in the two different versions and what conference committee will have to look at. So the state minimum salary schedule is to raise the bachelor's year zero to $49,000. That is the same in the House and the Senate versions. So the state teacher minimum last year, this would raise it $1,500. And state aid to classrooms, the funding formula, that's something for conference committee to debate. The employer health insurance was the same in both the House and Senate version, as well as this bus driver salary increase of 2%. So that is something that we know those are going to happen because they were in the same in both versions of the House and the Senate's budget. Budget considerations from the district level to increase the minimum teacher salary schedule from bachelor's year zero from $47,500 to $50,992. And we came up with that $50,992 because that was the bachelor's year zero for the bachelor's plus 18 lane that is going away. The state is getting rid of that lane. And so in order for us to not leave that lane behind as we move towards just a 4-lane teacher salary scale. So we'll now have bachelor's, master's, master's plus 30, and doctorate. So we essentially got rid of the bachelor's lane and moved all of those bachelor teachers over. So they will see the largest increase of all of the lanes because they're moving to that bachelor's plus 18. But even the teachers that are currently in that bachelor's plus 18 lane will still see their step plus the $1,000 increase, which is our recommendation. So we looked at doing a $1,500 per cell increase versus a $1,000 increase, and just looking at the cost versus what we're going to get from the state. The administration would recommend the $1,000 increase per cell, which is $7.79 million increase. That's just that was our recommendation for our teacher salary increase. I'll turn this over to Dr. Ross for the next few slides.
Thank you, Ms. Tucker. So this time we want to look at the district considerations. And we want to start out with a total request for positions. As we often hear when we go through our budget calendar, we ask our principals and we ask our stakeholders about needs in the district. We had a total requested position estimated around $2.5 million. That was the minimum of estimating those positions. What we recommended is how do we pay for this? So we went to look at potential salary reduction and benefits. So with removing all ESSER positions or moving those that we could into empty areas in the general fund, as well as the Now, looking at the NARIF program moving to fund balance, we were able to make a savings of $1.4 million. We do have additional cost to that in terms of we are required to pay for the sled checks, so we estimate that at about $63,000. Magic School AI that we're going to add in about $100,000, and then instructional technology previously funded by the state. So these are programs for special education, programs that we had to keep track of our records. Those are being moved to the district, so that's about $400,000. So with that savings of 1.4, I looked at what could we do to help our schools. Now I know there are not a lot of love for administrators, but the burdens on schools and the increased responsibilities, we want the best of the best, and we are trying to get our administration positioned to take care of these the legal and operational challenges that we face. As we move to the middle school models, we know that our intermediate schools are not staffed administratively like our middle schools. So that would require two, we call assistant principals for instruction for our two new middle schools that we'll bring up through rezoning. Increased contract days for our behavioral specialists. This is a position that was in ESSER that we're moving to the general fund, would cause an increase of days, so at $5,000. With the increase legal responsibilities placed on the administration, we have directors that will be doing more negotiating and legal work with us. So it is not additional, but it's a reclass of directors to executive directors at $36,000. We have, I think every building is requesting new custodial help, more custodians to help with the facilities. To put a new or additional custodian in each building would be close to 23 new positions. Our answer to that is to help the maintenance staff and the custodial staff out by having 2 afternoon maintenance teams. These would be float teams that would move one in one half of the district, the other on the other half of the district, on schedule to help the buildings. We feel like we can get more of our current maintenance staff directed towards the additional work orders that are coming in, and that these maintenance teams and custodial teams could move and support the schools, kind of like our rapid response team. One of the items that I want to discuss a little bit more is what I call onboarding and offboarding coordinators. One for the legal and the board and requirements for certified, and then the legal and policy requirements for classified. These are 2 different things. But our smallest division is human resources. And we constantly hear about what we need to do in terms of contacting with the potential applicants, as well as reaching out to the hiring managers. But if you look at the requirements for human resources, there is recruiting, onboarding, supporting, and then offboarding. So much of the limited staff in HR is on the supporting end of our work. It is really unfair to ask them to, they're constantly putting down one thing to pick up another. And I think take undue criticism because of the mounting work that is placed on them. I wanted to spend a little bit more time in executive session to talk about some of the legal issues that are abounding, but in the spirit of transparency, I will share that we have so much time in supporting now. The requirements of benefits, the requirements of Section 430 of the Teacher Dismissal Act, 460, 440, these are swamping us, and what we like to be is more outward facing in terms of how we address potential employees. That's kind of why these meetings are so critical. because all the work that has to go in, we end up putting the ball down to juggle the rest of them. This department, in terms of these, we've been restructuring it, but this would also allow us to not just focus on one department, but help flows with what goes on with onboarding and finance and payroll. There are a lot of new benefits and responsibilities with retirees that we need to get right, and we can't make error. Putting that pressure, I think we're at a point of crushed depth. I think we have put so much pressure and so much. My daddy was a Navy man, and he said if you take a sub-captain would take his ship to crushed depth, and then just to see how much pressure it can sustain and rise up. But we're at crushed depth, and we need some relief. Either the tasks of the administration have to be relieved, or the whole needs to be stronger. So that's why, and I know there's no advocate for the administration, and I'm not asking anybody to feel sorry. I am asking us to look at the particular issues that we're tasked with. The next one is to get parity with the substitute pay that we have with our neighbors. I know we heard a lot about substitute pay. I believe in this estimate we add about $10 to every sale on the substitute pay, so that'd be a $10 increase. And I'll speak more about, we had public participation about the D-team supplement with elementary and middle school. This gives me an opportunity to kind of respond to that. I think in order for us to sustain all of our programs, including lacrosse, I want to start early. I need to get these students started in these programs early. And I see us building all of our programs, whether tennis, to swimming, to football, to lacrosse, to soccer, by getting kids started early. So we'll discuss how this $40,000 could really get us ahead of the game in getting our students involved. The last one is $30,000 for band supplements. We wanted to give each of our high schools an additional $10,000 to assist with band and their supplements for their staff. So that's where we get the 1.4 from. And the last thing is what we're going to do in terms of fund balance. We're proposing another $1,000, that should be payment per employee, in the fall for American Education Week, as we've done. I've already said move the NARI program, which has been a great recruiter for us, to fund balance. We are, for our, I know we have a maintenance plan with with the state fleet, but when it comes to our local school buses, we want to make sure that we have all the maintenance and upgrades on our activity buses. And the board has previously allowed us for critical needs to have 6 FTEs that, of course, would require board approval. That would be in for critical needs as we hit in the fall. And this allows us in human resources, as soon as we see someone for a critical need, that we can put them on the packet for approval. So with that, I'll let our CFO, Heather Tucker, go through the fund balance assignments.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. So the list we have here is our audited fund balance from June 30th of 2024, where we finished with our unassigned fund balance of $53 million. You can see what was assigned in last year's unassigned fund balance, or what was assigned for last year's assigned fund balance, some set-asides. What Dr. Ross just kind of outlined is what we would recommend to set aside for this year's assigned fund balance: the $3 million for the employee retention incentive, $3.5 million for capital for school buses, $400,000 for NARI payments, and the $555,000 for the 6 FTEs for critical needs. So you all just passed a change to our board policy DFAB that allows us to have our reserve funds range from 17 to 20%. So I've given you some ranges there of where this year's fund balance to stay within those ranges of board policy would need to land for the end of this year, as well as for the proposed budget for next year. So our proposed budget for next year is $250 million, and so those ranges would be 17% is 42.5, and 20% would be $50 million. So those are our assigned fund balance recommendations for consideration. So talking about our revenues and how we balance the local and state share. I know Dr. Ross already shared some of this in his presentation, but as we've seen the state reducing its share to the local school districts. And so we've seen that not just in the amount of money for state aid to classroom, we've seen it decrease from $300 million to $112 million this year. We've also seen it in line items like the or informational technology software, things like MathNation and other softwares that Dreambox for K through 12. Those costs have previously been picked up by the State Department, and they've recently told us that they're not covering those for next year. So those are things that our teachers and our staff are used to, and that if we were to continue those, we would have to pick that up. So we are just seeing this shift from the state funding, whether it be for state aid to classroom or on other levels, we're seeing the state funding decrease. So last year, our state funding was 64%, our local was 35%. If we look at next year's projections, this is our projected general fund revenues for FY 25-26. So looking at our taxes, and I'll get into our local taxes in just a moment, but looking at taxes calculated at 261 mills, which is our recommendation for next year, we project based on the reassessed values, we would collect $90 million. So our current budget is approved, our budget projection, that's 9.6%. Other local revenues, so we're at 37.8%. So we're seeing the local share have to increase to offset the state revenues. Our state revenues have decreased to 62%. State aid to classroom is going down. These numbers for state aid to classroom are based on the original House projections. House 2, if that is to pass what goes through conference, would give us an additional $400,000 in state aid to classroom. But that is the top end of what the state would give us in any given day. The problem is we don't know what the low end of that looks like. So the state aid to classroom is based off of it's updated on our 135th day, and so that's our most recent projections. But they will reassess on the 5th day and the 45th day next year. So the top end of that is the $4 million plus an additional $400,000 if conference approves the Senate version. But again, that's our top end. If we see student enrollment decline, if we see anything else that changes that formula, we don't know what the lowest end of that would look like. So this is a conservative estimate using the House, the original House projection. And so the revenue projection for next year would be $250 million as far as balancing our budget. So what do our expenditures look like? These are our projected expenditures based on the budget that the administration has proposed, still keeping in line with salaries and fringe being approximately 88% of the overall expenditures, and supplies, services, and equipment making up 12% of that. We have seen an increase in contractual services and other objects. A lot of that $850,000 increase, $500,000 of that is the additional money that we have put towards technology contractual services for things like Magic School AI, to pick up the things that the State Department has said that they will not be covering. So we've made provisions to cover those and continue with those services in our contractual services and other objects. So state funds. Yes, ma'am.
Hold on, just because this is a lot. At a partway point, or I don't know if we're halfway through what's going on here, but does anybody have any questions? I thought it would just be helpful to maybe sort of try to break some of this
Absolutely.
up. Ms. Huddle, go ahead.
I'll do two and see what everybody else has. If you could go back, I think, to the revenue. Yes, right there. Mm-hmm. The other state revenues, that decrease, is that the things you're talking about, like Magic?
So that
Or,
is,
I mean,
that,
they don't refund that, I'm sorry, Dreambox.
so that is part of that. There are quite a few things that they have paid for in the last 2 years that they are slowly, they're slowly telling us as they are finishing their budget that they'll no longer be covering those. In fact, the two that we found out about last week totaled about $300,000, and those were quotes from 2 years ago when we thought they were going to do this. We haven't gotten updated quotes on what that's actually going to cost us. We were just trying to make provisions so we don't lose those services.
Right. And my other question for now, if you go back to the last slide, you were talking about contractual services. We, and I'm not sure, I may be the only person left from that board, but at one point, this board approved, I think it was about $500,000 for capturing kids' hearts. And I thought we weren't doing it anymore, but then we had a presentation from a couple of principals that talked about it. So are we still doing capturing kids' hearts?
We're doing the principles of it, we're just not paying for it. We don't have the.
Cool, okay.
Mr. Bainum?
Hopefully this isn't a dumb question, but on the slideshow, Dr. Ralston, Ms. Tucker, everything's, for the most part, rounded numbers. And just for instance, on the Magic School AI, that contract price was a different amount. Is it just rounded up to the nearest, like 10,000 or 100,000 or something?
Yes, sir. It is, because we know that that price will go up every year, and so we were just rounding for simplicity's sake to make sure that that money is available in the technology budget.
So in the budget book, we'll get actual hard numbers?
Yes.
Well, yes. Well, our budget is our best estimate of.
Our budget is our best
Our
estimate,
actuals are where we're gonna get exactly where it came in at, but
because I believe that actual contract is $76,000. I'm looking at Jenny. I believe the actual price for Magic School AI is $76,000 for next year, but we know that price will go up as we have that contract.
Thank you.
Any other, Mr. Satterfield?
Yes, I know that in the past, we've discussed about our special education population and some sort of taking some sort of initiative for them to be active after school. And I was looking at the budget considerations with the middle level athletic director and things like that. Is that the programs for the special education kids and getting them to participate in activities, teams, sports and all, is that under the same sort
yes,
of thing,
sir.
Dr.
So this is all in the beauty of the work that we've done is this is very inclusive. And I think there's an agenda item, I'm gonna go over this in detail, but yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
This is about a much earlier slide. I don't even know where it was in the roll.
Let me go
but
back.
Regarding the ESSER funds, so I
Yes.
guess my question is, how many ESSER counselors do we have allocated currently to elementary and middle schools?
9.
Ms. Scott, there are a total of 9 clinical counselors district-wide.
Right, yeah. How do we use those? Are there a certain number that specifically work just for the elementary and middle schools, or are they just?
They're spread evenly among the districts, so they may have actually representation at different levels. So they're not all just elementary or just middle school, but they may have a representation of all the levels, just spread out across the district.
Okay. So I guess what I'm trying to determine within me is just the good part about, when ESSER came about, it was a good thing and proactive, but we just didn't know at the time, the assumption was then that within 3 years, our COVID issues would be resolved. And that's certainly, we couldn't have known better or known really different back then, but that's obviously not the case. There are long-term effects from COVID. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, it seems to me that the kids who are probably most impacted by those COVID-type impacts from COVID would be the middle school and the elementary children. I think maybe I perceive personally that maybe the high school kids could be well adjusted or adjust to it better than the younger kids. So I'm trying to think of how much would it cost us to keep, if we were to keep the counselors dedicated to elementary and middle school, what would that look like?
You go to the expenditure slide that you were on before. Scully, just hearing the discussion tonight about that, you'll see that we increased contractual services about 4.6%. One of the things that we feel that we can do to be effective, working with Dr. Harris and his clinical counselors, is to look at them in terms of their private as their private providers who are insured, that we could provide them the service and probably get more hours than we would do. We would bill them by hour, or they would bill us by hours for the work that we're doing. So that's something that we're working on now. We know that the clinical counselors are needed. What happens is, as we look at bringing them on full time, they haven't had a raise in 3 years. So once you bring them in, you do need to put them on a schedule. We need to pay fringe and benefits and health care. So more of that funding starts to get taken up. So we're going to look at that option of contracting with them so that those services continue under contractual services versus salary and fringe.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes.
I'd just like to echo what Mr. Scully said, and even suppose that maybe some of those problems were there and we just weren't dealing with them before. And it might not have just been COVID that brought those out. And many of our children have roadblocks to their learning. And if your child doesn't have those roadblocks, you don't understand the importance of what those clinical counselors do. And I think that our parent that spoke tonight would agree that those roadblocks are there for children. And it seems like a wise expenditure to look at how to keep including those somehow in this budget so that we don't lose those services.
Ms. Snipes,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I had a comment. I mean, as far as I remember, we did know at the time these positions were going to be time limited. I remember us speaking about these things. And as much as I'm in the same position as everyone else, I've gotten the same emails from parents. We don't want to take these important positions away from our children. I just do think it's necessary to clarify that we did talk about this at the time, that these were going to be temporary positions.
Understood. If we don't have other questions.
I have one more question.
Okay.
And it's really a procedural question. So the projected fund balance is the source of some changes, and I was just wondering, can the board vote to spend projected fund balance, or do we have to wait until the year is over and we know what the fund balance is? And you don't have to answer that right now. I'm just, procedurally, I just wonder if you can really vote to spend a fund balance that you're not 100% sure you have yet.
Well, and I think in the past, it's always been to assign part of that fund balance, knowing that we're going to have a portion of it. So I can definitely look into that, but I think it's
since
that
I've been on the board, I don't believe we've ever voted in advance.
in advance.
Yeah. So-
Is it on the, and I'm just checking for clarification, was
Yeah.
last year's budget, didn't we have assignments in
Last
that?
year's budget, the last few have had an assignment kind of allocation, and each one of those items would come back to the board for a vote. It was just, these were things that were planned for essentially to be set aside for the fund balance, and then because last year last year had the 1.5 million for the portables, and then that didn't come to fruition, so we were able to use that for band. So that was part of the assigned fund balance. That was part of the board budget vote. I
Okay,
guess.
the other question I have is, when that was done with those portables, I think you had just started, so you may remember, but I really wanted to spend that on like an additional reading intervention, and I was told you can't spend that on a recurring things, on additional positions, but we have in here 6 additional positions. So I'm
Can I explain?
confused. Yeah.
We've done this for the last 3 years, so I'll remind that the goal of these positions was not to live in the fund balance. It was that each year when we get to, the recruiting year is starting early and earlier. And so if we get to, I think Dr. Turner, we start recruiting in January, and then, right, but once that recruiting happens, we don't have a budget for new teachers. And so that gives us the ability to hire 6 teachers right off the bat. And then we use that. And if we always said if we get to the end of the year and we're 100% hired, then that's drawn from fund balance. But it's a year-to-year deal. Those 6 positions are assumed in January before the budget is approved. Once the budget is approved, they're dissolved. They're now into the general fund. So I just wanted to clarify, they don't live in fund balance.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Satterfield?
I want to ask one last question, not my last question, not everybody else's. The increase in money for substitutes, where would that take us for substitute pay? Because I know that's an issue in a lot of schools, and so what would that bring teacher or substitute pay to?
So the proposed substitute increase would bring us more in line with Richland 1, which is essentially a $10 increase for each of the categories. So for like the full day substitute with a bachelor's degree, it would bump that up $10. So $105 for a daily rate. Full day substitute, non-certified would be $95. Full day substitute of a certified teacher would be $115. So it would bump essentially each one of those categories up $10, which is more in line with Richland 1.
I have a follow-up question to that. Would it include any adjustments for, I forget the word, not permanent subs, but long-term subs? Would there be any increase for long-term subs?
So the long-term subs are don't fall in this schedule. They are based on their certification, and Dr. Turner, help me if I'm
I guess I know
correct.
it's based on like where they fell when they retired.
And so
right?
that doesn't fall in the schedule from like the daily rates from ESS.
But it never changes, right, for that individual?
For that individual.
Yeah, by definition, in alignment with what's in that board policy, a long-term sub, it has nothing to do with retirement status. A long-term sub serves 10 consecutive days in a classroom, and they have to be certified in the role for which they are serving for that vacancy, and they qualify under that, but they get the certified rate of pay as long as it's 10 consecutive days, and it's for a position for which they are certified, and that's written in the administrative rule.
Right, but what's the certified rate of pay? It's based on how many years, right, they taught in their education?
Yes, certified rate of pay is based on teacher salary schedule.
Right, so I guess I'm
For
asking
long-term.
if you retired with 20 years of service, I'll just use that as an example, and it's 5 years later and you've been subbing, is it always 20 years that you get based on, or do I now get based on 25 years?
You get it based on what's on your certificate, and the ESS, the provider, they're the ones that look at that certificate, and they're the ones that validate pay based on their certificate. So it'd
Okay,
be,
so
yeah,
what would be on the certificate in my example?
yeah, I'd have to pull a
Okay.
retiree because ESS handles their certificate is what I'm
Okay.
telling you.
Well, I guess I'm just sharing that we have some long-term subs that are really great teachers, and that I've heard they're not getting increases. I don't know, because I don't really understand the ins and outs of how it works, but.
And Ms. Huddle, I don't know if the bill that I spoke about earlier, the educator, can't remember the exact title of the bill, but that talks about a lifetime teacher certificate, because currently you would still have to recertify your certificate every few years, make sure that you're keeping up with your professional development. So the lifetime certification certificate might make a difference in that, and that's something that we could look at. I'm not sure how that plays into that factor.
Thanks.
Okay, I think I stopped at state funds.
You mean we're not done?
I know it's late,
Can
and
we
this
just
is
table
what
it?
we all want to be talking about.
Part two.
Part two.
Next meeting.
Okay. I will try to go quickly, but all right, I'll skip through what Dr. Ross talked about. So
That
the state
sounds
aid,
like a good plan.
state aid to classroom, this formula we discussed before, seen a decrease in state aid to our classroom, our weightings. Dr. Ross talked about this, which we will know more tomorrow based on conference committee. All right, so state budget estimates. Okay, so state budget estimates, again, conservative estimates based on the House projection is $4 million. If we look at House 2 and Senate, if those pass, there's an additional $400,000 that we may be getting. It increases state aid to classroom to about $2.2 million, and health insurance also goes up with the additional increases for Senate and House 2. Okay, so local revenue, what everybody wants to talk about. Our local revenue is based on our weighted pupil units. We look at our index of tax-paying ability, hold harmless funding, and then we have to figure out how to cover this the additional revenue gap that we're seeing with the reduced funding from the state. So looking at our 4% and 6% properties, our 4% properties have seen a reassessment. If you live in Lexington County, you got your reassessments in the last few weeks. Richland County saw their reassessment last year, so we're seeing the revenues from their reassessment coming in now because those tax bills went out in December, and we're getting that revenue currently. So this is a actual Lexington County tax bill. And so I just want to highlight this because on the tax bill that comes out with your 4% property, you see this pie chart, which makes it look like the school district is getting 72% of that primary tax bill. And this is based on the millage rates before, if you look at this tiny little line up here, I can't even read it from here without my glasses. It basically says this doesn't include any exemptions or credits, which is your homeowner's credit for that 4% property. So on a 4% property, the school district is actually getting about 17% of that based on the debt service and some other millage. The agency or the zoo, ICRC, some of those other entities are getting also approximately 17%, and the county is getting about 65%. So if you look at this, your tax bill and live in Lexington County, just want to highlight that this is not 100% accurate if this is a 4% property because it does not include those exemptions and credits. All right, so what do we look like for next year? So after spending the last week and a half digging through our revenue for the last 10 years, looking at trends, looking at the growth in Richland and Lexington County, I stepped back on something that I said during our first reading. I said I didn't want to change one more thing in a year where everything was changing. I have reconsidered that given the data. I am a data person. Again, I looked at 10 years of tax revenue and looked at what we collect in the current year, because that's really what matters for our budget. If a property goes into foreclosure and it sells 2 years down the road, we will collect those taxes, which makes our collection rate look higher, but we don't collect it in the year where the tax bill went out. So looking at the last 10 years, our revenue collection in the year that we send out tax bills is 97.1%. So skin of our teeth, 97%. So I've gone back and re-estimated our value of a mill based on a 97% collection rate and come up with a millage rate of, value of a mill at $355,629. So if we look at our projected local revenue from this year, our rollback mill, again, we're changing things from 95%, which is what we've done the last few years, to 97%, which I do feel like is more accurate based on 10 years worth of data. So our rollback millage would be 243 mills. We are allowed to increase our millage rate by the Consumer Price Index and population growth. And these are not numbers that we come up with. These are values given to us by Revenue and Fiscal Affairs and the county of what we are allowed to increase our millage by. CPI is 2.95. Our population growth was 2.04 for an allowable increase of 4.99%, which would, given our rollback millage plus allowable millage cap for this year, is 12.1. Previously not used look-back millage, we can go back 3 years and capture any of those mills to give you those ranges. And that's what I shared with you at last board meeting, kind of low end of what we could collect from the local versus the high end. And then based on your recommendations or your direction as far as what the board wanted to approve, where we would land. So these are our mill caps for the last 3 years, what we could actually go back. We have a cumulative total of 51.8 mills that we could actually increase this year. But the administration's recommendation, given all of that, is right here in the kind of the teal column. So the recommendation would be to reduce our millage by 5 mills from last year, 266 to 261, based on the value of a mill at $355,000. That uses the 12.1 mills of allowable growth for this year based on the CPI and growth. And then we would use only 5 look-back mills to essentially get us. So looking at all of the things that were prioritized from the board, from all of our stakeholders as far as raises for teachers and staff, and then the additional increases of the other things, the other items that were recommended by the administration. This is what we would need to balance our budget, is $8 million in additional revenue. So that, again, would use 5 look-back mills. Millage stabilization to stay at 266 mills would require 10.7. And this does require a change in that estimated collection rate from 95 to 97%. I feel comfortable with that, looking at the last 10 years of data. I will say there was an anomaly in 2024 with revenue. There was a large jump in revenue in 2024 for primary residences, or for local collections. And after digging in with the counties, it looks like we had a lot of transfer of property in 2024 across the district, property that was previously farmland that was sold commercial. And I think that is a lot of the property that was sold for a lot of the developments that are happening. And so while those first sales are commercial property sales, we get the 6% on that. Moving forward, those pieces will become primary homes, or will be unless they become renters. And so those properties will be parceled out and they will become individual residences. So I think that was one anomaly year. But again, I feel comfortable looking at the data that 97% collection rate is something that I can stand up here and say, given the data, that's my best estimate at the time. So administration's recommendation is to look at the second reading. These were our recommendations. Again, we had first reading at our previous board meeting, but we didn't really have any direction on, had the priorities, but didn't have a lot of direction on where to land with our millage rate. So this is the administration's recommendation, and I stand for any questions, comments, discussion. I know it's late, but.
If you can go back to, there's a slide that shows all the budget increases. It has like the additional principals and all of that.
Yes, I know what you're talking
Sorry.
This one?
This was in the first round of questions.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well, I was trying not to ask too many then. This isn't even really a question. I'm assuming we're in discussion now. This is really just, I guess, a point for the rest of the board is when you look at that, and I looked at what's in going into classrooms, and it's $186,000 for increase in substitutes and $30,000 for the additional band supplements. The rest of that does not go into the classroom, and that accounts for only 15%. And I'm just very concerned that we are putting more money into administrative and non-classroom areas and not as much into the classroom itself. I realize we have the teacher raises and all that, but I'm still very concerned about reading. We had a slide of, an 8th grade class and how many students weren't even close to 8th grade reading level. And I just, as a board member, I would like to see us focus more on things like reading at early ages.
Other comments or questions?
Just one, does the watercraft bill that you mentioned, how does that figure into this final projection?
So that did not pass this year. It will be carried over.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Thank you.
And so it's definitely something that we're following since this is the first year of a 2-year legislative session. That will essentially pick back up where it left off this year. And I know it has a lot of support. So that is something that we are definitely considering what its impact will look like moving forward.
Thanks.
I have one other question. The typical 15 million for capital expenditures isn't in here, so is that not part of the vote tonight?
No, we usually bring that into that final recommendation when we set the debt service millage. I think we can have that for our discussion for the June 9th meeting.
Okay.
Go ahead.
While we're on this, so that we can, we want to make sure that the June 9th meeting is productive. Of the salaries that we're asking for increase, we had a lot of discussion. Is there a sense of direction in which we wanted to do? I do know that it's never a good time to add to the administration. I get that. But these tasks are still coming.
That's not what, I know Ms. Huddle mentioned that, that's not what alarm, for lack of a better word, and I, have been honest about my feedback on the athletic piece, and I'm on the fence with that. If there are other things that we can't meet that are pressing because of budget, then I want to be sure that we couldn't be using that money to do those things first.
And I think one of the things that we can do for the discussion, since we won't have a reading next time, is just present what we're doing with reading, with the additions we have, and if that's not sufficient, then look at making those adjustments
Yeah,
there.
and I don't have to get into the weeds of it, obviously, but with some of the feedback we've gotten on certain things or whatever, I want to be able to say that we put a budget together that
Amen.
checked all the immediate boxes, just to be sure. Mr. Satterfield?
Yes, I'm looking at these budget considerations, and I understand there's always this desire to put more money into instruction and things like tutoring and all that kind of stuff. I agree. There's no question. But, I'm looking at some of this stuff, this 2 p.m. maintenance custodial teams, we got 15,000 requests for repairs that we don't have enough people to solve those. The athletic supplements are not much at all, but we're going to you have to have those. You can't just ask somebody to stay after school for an extra 3 hours just because. But I don't really see anything in there that's really like a waste. Now, I do have the same sort of concerns that Mr. Scully and Mr. Herring had with regards to with the ESSER positions that are going to go away. And I know you talked about contractual services. Maybe that's a way to address it. So maybe if that is a budget consideration, maybe we can get a little more information so to compare and see. The times they are changing, as Bob Dylan says, and if we have students that are struggling with some of the things they're struggling with, I don't think it's just because of COVID. I think we have students that are struggling. We always hear things about kids getting bullied and a myriad of things with middle school girls and depression and suicide rates because of cell phones and all this and that. So I think it warrants a discussion, a little further discussion on some of those things.
And Dr. Ross, as a point of clarification, I'm sorry, I made the comment about budget towards the athletics, but I was thinking about the formation of the new program and not these people that already are employed. Yeah, okay. When you made that comment, when Mr. Satterfield commented, I just wanted to make sure that was understood. All right, do we have any other questions on this?
I have one. Before the next meeting, could we get org charts for the areas where the request is for the executive director positions?
Yes, ma'am.
All right,
Yeah, I just wanted to concur with Mr. Satterfield on that. I don't see anything wasted here, and education and instruction doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have to have the supplementary positions and the help to make the classroom become what it is. And so I would also like to see some consideration for the counselors, if there's anything we can do there. But
all right, we have a motion on the floor for the second reading. It's probably second. All those in favor? All those opposed? And are you abstaining?
I'm abstaining because I believe that per policy DB, we're supposed to have a line item budget, so I'm abstaining.
Okay, and Ms. Barnhart? Okay. So we have,
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the one-time educator payment.
wait, I don't think I mean, I know the motion passed, but I don't think you have the numbers for the minutes. Mr. Bainham, did you vote for? Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. All right, so we have a motion on the floor for the one-time educator payment, and it's been properly second. All those in favor?
Can we get more information?
Yes, ma'am. So we have an opportunity to provide a one-time payment. I guess the question is, where do the funds come from? This is to, as we look at closing out the year end, when we look at positions that have not been filled and how we budget for positions, we take a midpoint bachelor's 18-12 position. I'm talking about on this budget though. On this budget the current budget is bachelor's 18-12, correct? Yeah. So we take a bachelor's 18-12, and if we hire a doctorate with 10 years, we lose money. If you hire a bachelor with 3 years, you're, I won't say making money, but you have savings. And we never tell our principals, hey, I need you to perfectly balance your expertise. We hire the best candidates. But at the end, when we get through, these funds are still in the fund for salaries and benefits. Now, we can do two things. We can pass it through to fund balance, or you redistribute it to the employees. Our recommendation is to redistribute it to the employees, so it would be the permanent employees that have signed their letter of agreement or their assurance forms. They would receive a one-time payment of $1,500 on June 6th. The reason that we've advanced this to action is because of our payroll. June 30th, you don't have this option. So we would, we have, to make that payroll, we would have to make it on the June 1st date in order to make the special payroll. So again, we present this for action tonight.
Just want to clarify, this is for teachers, staff, support staff, administrators. Who does this not include?
This would not include temporary employees.
Okay, so all permanent, full-time, part-time, no.
Permanent.
Permanent, full-time positions in the district
That's correct.
will get this bonus.
Returning for next year.
Returning for next year.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Huddle?
So I know we have some positions to fill, as we always do this time of year. And if we're paying this on June 6th, but we don't hire a new teacher until July, do they still get it?
No, ma'am. Nope. No, ma'am. So this would, we would go back in July if we have a new, so we can't use this for recruiting. This is really for retention of our existing employee staff.
I guess the question I have is, would we be better off letting it go into the fund balance? Like, letting it go into the fund balance so that we could do that. And also because I think sometimes, I don't know that the numbers are large, but I know in the past, we've had some people sign contracts and then they don't show up. So it just seems like it would be more advantageous to offer something, at the beginning of the school year.
you know, I understand. I think the staff watching would probably like it now. But we will have an opportunity, if this budget should pass as we have it recommended, that we could say to that July teacher, American Education Week, we already have funding there. Now, the board at that time wanted to add more money to it based on what we look like there, but this opportunity is over for us on June 30th.
I think too, teachers would be a great way to kickstart their a little bit of vacation, and that would probably make them feel pretty doggone good, so.
All right,
We will pay the FICA too, but we do have withholdings coming out of that. I had to say that.
I'm a little concerned that this goes to everyone. You know, I mean, I have no problem at all with it going to teachers and with staff who are paid at, you know, on the lower end of the pay scale. But the budget, if it goes through, is going to have, you know, for non-teaching staff, it's got the step increase plus another 2%. I'm going to amend the motion to limit the increase to all certified staff and all non-certified staff that make less than $75,000 a year.
We don't have a second, so that motion fails. Right, we have an original motion on the floor to approve the one-time educator payment. All those in favor?
Yes.
All right, and the motion carries 7-0.